watch someone get a shot in the old days? Me either. Any rate, like I did in my first and second COVID-19 vaccination shot, I'm about to get my booster shot and do it publicly. That's because the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, looked at all the data, completed their review, and determined the boosters for the Pfizer vaccine, others will come later, maybe, I assume, but the Pfizer vaccine are safe and effective. They've had all the data they need. And last week they laid out who is eligible for those boosters for now. You're eligible for a booster if it's been 6 months since your second Pfizer shot, and if you fall into one of these categories. People over 65, which is hard to acknowledge, adults, I'm only joking, folks, adults with certain underlying health conditions like diabetes and obesity.
He's got jokes.
And those who are at increased risk of COVID-19 because of where you work or where you live, like healthcare workers, teachers, first responders, grocery store clerks. If you fall into these categories, you're eligible for the booster. Now, I know it doesn't look like it, but I am over 65. I wish I way over. And that's why I'm getting my booster shot today. The booster line is if you're fully vaccinated. The bottom line is that you're fully vaccinated.
The booster line.
And you're highly protected now from severe illness, even if you get COVID-19. You're safe, and we're going to do everything we can to keep it that way with the boosters. But let me be clear. Boosters are important. But the most important thing we need to do is get more people vaccinated. The vast majority of Americans are doing the right thing. Over 77% of adults have gotten at least one shot. About 23% haven't gotten any shots. And that distinct minority is causing an awful lot of us, an awful lot of damage for the rest of the country. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's why I'm moving forward with vaccination requirements wherever I can. On Wednesday, I'll be traveling to Chicago to talk about why it's so important that more businesses are instituting their own vaccine requirements. We know that to beat this pandemic and to save lives, to keep our children safe, our schools open, our economy going, we need to get folks vaccinated. So please, please do the right thing. Please get the shots. And it can save your life. It can save the lives of those around you. And it's easy, accessible, and it's free. So text your zip code to 438829. 438829, or visit vaccines.gov to find a vaccination location near you.
Vaccines.gov.
We can do this. Get vaccinated. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to get my booster shot, and right here. And the major is going to give me the shot.
Don't pass out, Sleepy Joe. Look at the theater. Look at the theater. You got to take off that shirt, Joey boy. Where is he going to get it? In his wrist? Any calls for something stupid? You know what? Should I turn off the chat on Facebook? Should I turn off the chat, or should I just report all the people that are saying stupid shit in the chat? Don't be dumb. You're going to get my page banned.
She's going to get one. I think she's teaching that, but she's going to get one, yes.
Mr. President, what do you say to world health leaders like the World Health Organization who say wealthy nations should help more countries without vaccinations get vaccinated before they get boosters here in America?
We are helping. We're doing more than every other nation in the world combined.
Lies.
We're going to have well over 1,100,000,000 shots, and we're going to continue going. We're going to do our part. We've also given a great deal of funding to COVAX, which is the vehicle that does this. So we have plenty of opportunities to make sure we get everyone in the world to play our part, the largest part in the world, of getting everyone vaccinated.
How many Americans need to be vaccinated for us to go back to normal? Like, what is the percentage of total vaccinations that have to be deployed?
Well, I think, look, I think we get the vast majority, like is going on in some industries and some schools, 97, 98%. I think we're awful close. And but I'm not the scientist. I think, but one thing for certain, a quarter of the country can't go unvaccinated, and us not continue to have a problem.
Any progress on a reconciliation deal today, Mr. President? How close do you think you are?
You know me, I'm more an optimist. I think things are going to go well. I think we're going to get it done. And I have meetings tonight, tomorrow, and for the next little bit.
What is at stake for your agenda and your presidency with what's happening on the Hill this week?
Victory is what's at stake.
Mr. President, how would you define success this week legislatively? How would you define success legislatively by the end of this week?
Well, it may not be by the end of the week. I hope it's by the end of the week. But as long as we're still alive, we got three things to do: the debt ceiling, the continuing resolution, and the two pieces of legislation. If we do that, the country's going to be in great shape. Thank
What's
you.
your message to Democrats as you have these calls? What's your message to Democrats, Mr. President?
And there you have it. That, my friends, my boys and girls listening, that was your president. Ay, 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 ay. Again. So, whatever. I don't even care. It's all theater. It's all theater. I'm not going to talk too much about anything right now because, yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff going on. Jen Psaki is going to be live sometime. She's supposedly going to start at 1:30. We obviously will cover that live for you. The House is going to come back at 2:00. We will cut Jen Psaki and put that on when I have to go pick up my kids. And then at 3:00, Senate's supposed to be coming back in session to talk about something, funding something. And that'll be at 3:00. My show tonight's going to be live at 8:00. A ton of stuff happened today. That's why you haven't seen me. That's why I didn't go live earlier. Adam was broadcasting to citizenstringer.tv. And we will continue to do so. But right now, I just want to say hi. How you guys doing? You doing good? Are you having a good Monday? My Monday started off crappy, okay? It started off crappy. Let me explain why. I woke up this morning, neck is stiff, but not like it used to be. So I'm getting better. Couldn't go to the gym today. And then I was like, okay, so I printed all the shirts, the rest of the shirts that I have to print, I printed this morning. We have no packing tape. I got ready to go out to get packing tape so I could finish sending out the rest of the mystery boxes because we still have the small, medium, triple XL, 4X, and 5X. The majority of them are all packed. The small, medium, and triple X are done. I just got to pack the 4X and 5X, which is like 20 shirts total. I'll just have to pack those, but I have no mystery box, so I couldn't I have no tape, so I couldn't do that. Then, as I was getting ready to leave to go buy more tape, the plumber gets here. Now, we've been having this ongoing issue. You guys probably remembered our shower flooded, our basement flooded when we first moved into this house. Our dishwasher didn't work. Our fridge didn't work. Our microwave didn't work. So we had a bunch of issues, when we first moved into the house. Now, all the issues have been remedied. I bought a new dishwasher after they bought two dishwashers that didn't work. And then we got a new fridge that's new to us, not new at all, and it appears like it's not new. Man, I've got all these sketchy-ass spiders that just, fly around, and they're big, and they're scary, and I hate spiders. But yeah, so there's a lot. So now the dishwasher's good, and it works. So we had a plumber. So when I was leaving to get tape, okay, that's what I'm talking about. When I was leaving to get tape, the plumber pulls up and he's like, hey, I'm going to finally fix your shower. He didn't say finally, but I was like, nice. Because the shower, basically what we'd have to do is we'd turn on the shower when the kids would go and everyone would take showers. Then we'd shut the water off from the main because it would just leak. And there's nothing we could do about it. And we're the ones that pay for the water. Anyway, so he does. And he fixes the shower. And then he says, you can't use the shower for at least 24 hours because, he's like better 48 hours because we're putting epoxy on it and all that. And I'm like, whatever, at least the shower's fixed. That's one less thing my wife is going to get mad at me. Now, for any of you guys that don't understand just how much goes into doing the show every day, I know you don't see anything but this angle, right? And sometimes you'll see this angle, which is the print, the action shot, the print action shot right there. So you'll see those two angles basically. Everyone's talking about this. The spiders, they fly on here. Can you see it? You can't. Look. Let's see if you can see it. Check this out. Bam. 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 Where is it? It's approximately... it's cut off. There's a ginormous spider web in this window that you see over in the corner right there. Over there. There's a huge spider web, and there's a spider that, when he's all like, how spiders get all close up, he's like that big. And I hate spiders. He's outside of the window. Anyway, long story short, that's done. That's great. Now, we were trying to figure out, we were trying to figure out a trailer and all this stuff. So I found a trailer, found a concession trailer in Richmond, Virginia. I bought the concession trailer in Richmond, Virginia. So now when we go to Iowa on the 9th for the Save America rally, which we will be there, we're going to live broadcast. We'll have the little concession trailer. So if we need to, we could do the show inside the trailer. I bought a tent. I bought a bunch of stuff so that we can actually do that. And that's going to be awesome. And then we'll have the concession trailer for when we start doing all the coffee and all that stuff. We should have coffee. I got to find a generator. And I really just, the fiscally responsive person in me does not want to go out and spend, $4,000 or, $1,000 on a generator just to use it for one event. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to deal with that. But I haven't figured it out yet. Anyway, I'm thinking that I could run it because my truck's, awesome. My truck in the bed of the truck, it's got a power outlet. I just don't know if that could handle, if it could power everything that we need to. Long story short, it doesn't matter. So I buy the trailer. We get that done. I'm going to pick it up later this week, and then it's good. Okay. So after the plumber left, it was like 11:45, and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go get packing tape so I could finish these boxes. Then my phone rings, and I'm like, what is this? How do I get to relax for a minute? My phone rings, and then it turns out that the warehouse space the retail / office / everything space, everything's done, and they want to meet me in 15 minutes at the new space to sign the lease. And I'm like, I need to get packing tape, but obviously I was like, yes, I'll meet you. I don't care if I have to run there naked because we need that office space. And so I go there, I sign it, I figure everything else out, and then it's great. I drive by CVS, I drive by Walgreens, and I probably drive by packing and shipping stores. I'm so excited about getting the warehouse space, or the new office and store and all that stuff, that I come right back home. And I sit down, and I eat some lunch, and then I remember I never bought packing tape. So, long story short, I'm going to be printing all the labels, so everyone that has an outstanding box, you'll get notification that it shipped today. They're going to ship tomorrow. After I pick up my kids today, I'm going to, because we live in a small town. I can only drop packages off between 10 and 2 o'clock. It's called bulk mailing. You can only do it when there's other people. So, long story. I'm going to pick up my kids at 3 o'clock. We're going to run up. I may just take them to the new store so they can be like, oh, shit, Daddy's cool, man. Daddy's going to have an actual storefront. Whoop, whoop. And then we'll move on. And we'll do that. And it's not going to be a storefront. That's, you guys kind of realize, maybe on the weekends or something, we'll do something where, we'll for invite only, where people can come if you're close, and we'll do like meetings or political candidates or something like that. But I'm going to be live broadcasting out of that space, and it's got the sickest backdrop you've ever seen, and it's already there. It's built, and it's awesome. So that's going to be the new studio. Then we got a room which is cool and dark and dry for the coffee. So it's a big area there. And then So all this stuff, and I can't really do anything until I turn on the electricity in the space and hire another person. But this whole table that you see in the background, with the red and all that fancy stuff, so that's going to be moved to that's going to be moved to the store. And then I'm going to buy a whole nother set of it. And then we're going to bada bing, bada boom. Bada bing, bada boom. You know what I'm saying? So we'll have 2 print shops. I'm going to hire at least 1 person. And probably 2, and I'll show them how to print the shirts. We are going to switch the way we do our store. So instead of having just a crap ton of t-shirts that are just, template stuff, you'll see in the next week, Pure Truth Clothing is going to become the new Pure Truth Coffee and Clothing website, and it's going to look phenomenal. So I'm redesigning everything. The shirt designs are going to be different, but they're going to be limited editions basically, and I'm only going to have 10 shirts per month, and then 10 coffee cup products. We're going to do sales monthly with the release of a new coffee flavor. So I'm still waiting to get the new coffee, the new coffee delivered here. But then the room that's going to store the coffee, man, I'm so excited. I can't wait to show you guys too. Can't wait to show you. The only problem is I really need to paint it, and I'm not a good painter, at painting buildings at all inside. And the whole place is a teal color, and it sucks, and it makes me want to vomit. But other than that, whatever. I may just leave it, or just put posters and shit on the wall, because we're, awesome. But that'll give me a new space. And here's the real reason. Here's the real reason why this is important, because I'm doing it for my family. And now you're going to be like, what is he talking about? The reason why I'm doing it is because my son, remember when I talked about this house before we moved here? There was a nice attic room that I was going to use for the studio because it was the biggest room in the office. The problem is I don't fit in it. It's up to here on my ceiling. So my oldest boy is up there. There's also another problem. I would have lasted about 20 minutes up there because there's no air conditioning and there's no heat. Now we do have a wall air conditioner and it stays cool enough for him as long as the door is closed. But there's no heat in that room either, and there's no insulation. So what we were going to do anyway, I was going to move all my office stuff, studio stuff into the living room and take over that room, and then this was going to become his room because there's no way in hell he can be up there in the winter. He'll be entirely too cold. And he even says, he's like, oh, I'll do it, but I'm not going to. So he's going to get this room, so he's super excited about that, except he also does not like spiders. And there's big spiders everywhere around our house. I walked outside and I swear a spider was like, what are you doing here? There's a spider web right there. The spider's sitting there looking at me, and I'm ran away like a girl. I hate spiders. I literally made my wife go take care of it. I'm not joking at all. But yeah, someone said buy American products. Are you talking to me? Yeah, we are. Why do you think we're doing all this stuff? Because here's the thing, my t-shirt prices are going to go up, but we found an American shirt printer that'll send us raw blanks. So we found it, but we have to print them all ourselves. So you're going to see, instead of having a whole pile of whole pile of stuff in our store, we're only going to have a smaller amount because I want to. I want to make it, but coffee obviously is not coming from America. That's Colombian and Italian and all sorts of other stuff. I can't tell you yet. Somebody said, won't UPS come to your house to pick up packages? You could schedule that online. I do. Yeah, but the problem is I don't ship 3 or 4 packages. I ship 80 packages at a time. And the problem, and UPS, they don't want to, they have to pick it up, but the guy, he complains. He's old. I don't blame him, I don't blame him. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do. And then they will have to pick him up because that's right downtown. That's a younger mail carrier that'll be more happy to do it. But someone said I have t-shirt printing experience. Yeah, if you live close by here, I want someone that has t-shirt printing experience plus they could do some other stuff. Someone said now I know how to get to Steve with spiders. Yeah. Someone said they're just wood spiders. Don't be afraid of wood spiders. I don't care what kind of spiders they are. I know they're harmless. We already looked them up. But they're like, whoa, yo, what you doing in my hood? That's what I'm talking about tonight. If you didn't see my tweets yesterday, I got so mad. I tried to type an article today. I couldn't do it. You may have seen, some news articles. Look, there's another. Oh, that's not a spider. That's one of those stink bug things. And the spider's going to eat the stink bug thing. Spider may already be eating a stink bug thing. Oh, God. What the hell was I talking about? Oh, yeah, the hood comment. Yeah. Because, there's never been a white person that lived in a hood. Because a hood doesn't mean a neighborhood, it means a ghetto, apparently, according to people. So if you say hood, guess what? That means you're racist. That's what that means now. So, make sure you don't say hood to anybody ever, because then you are racist. So don't say hood. And make sure you don't do it to a guy named, what the hell's his name? I'm going to talk about it tonight. So I'm actually, if you want to hear my rants, like I already wrote it, like the monologue that I'm going to say, I already started writing it because I was going to write it as an article. And I'm like, well, I can't put that as an article. That's way too ranty for it. Yeah, let me tell you, this guy, and you can find it on my Twitter if you PT News Network on Twitter. But I wrote Frederick Joseph. Apparently, he's an author. He's from New York City, I believe, and he'll likely ban me or something later. But he's the best-selling author of The Black Friend. Yeah, The Black Friend on being a better white person. Not a racist at all. But apparently someone was walking her dog, and his dog was barking, and some other dog was barking, and everybody was barking back and forth. And so the lady walked up, and apparently she said, and it's not captured on the video, of course, but apparently she said, "Why are you here? Why don't you go back to your hood or something?" Which is like neighborhood. It's short for neighborhood. I grew up in the hood. I grew up poor, white, and living in rural freaking New Hampshire. I can't say hood? I can't say I grew up in the hood? I did. What else do you call it? It's the neighborhood. That's what it means. But apparently, if you say it to a black person, then that just means they're the only ones that are allowed to say hood, or all the other words that nobody else is allowed to say ever. Culture. You can't even have white rappers because they get pissed off. Everyone else gets pissed off because they're stealing their culture. So now what did this verified Twitter account do? Well, he simply recorded this lady, posted it online, made it go viral, intentionally doxed her, found out who she was, intentionally doxed her, published her information on his verified Twitter account, contacted her employer, got her employer to fire her, all within 12 hours. All within 12 hours. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Just that and some of the other crazy news stories. I've decided that I just don't care anymore. I don't care to try to censor it down. I don't care to try to be PC. I don't care. I really don't. I just want to be honest. Page and it's funny because when these racists, and I will say that this guy is a racist, in my humble opinion, I'm covered, my ass is covered, you can't sue me. In my opinion, he's racist because if you write a book, think about it, if I wrote a book saying The White Friend on being a better black person, that would be racist, wouldn't it? It would be construed, as some big racist thing. But this guy could a black dude can tell a person how to be I don't even know what his book's about because frankly I give two shits. I don't care. The only thing I know is that he got this girl fired because she was drunk and said, "Why don't you go back to your hood?" because he was being an ass to her, and it was in the video. She didn't say that in the video. Some other guy corroborated. Some guy named Steve. Like, why do you why do you got to ruin the name Steve for all the other good Steves, huh? I bet you spell your name with a V, right? Steve. And I'll say your name too. And I'm going to tell you, because here's the thing, and I think it's the right thing to do, that if these people, oh my God, I can't, these white ally, I just hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. It's all fake. It's all grifts. This guy wrote this book. He went out probably seeking to have some lady yell at him about the dog. And then guess what? Now he's going to sell a bunch of copies and books. MSNBC is going to have him come on. He's going to be like, "Oh my God, it was so bad. It was like she was wearing sheets. She said, go back to my hood." My goodness, if that's the only bad thing people say to you, do you know how many times, people just say negative shit all the time. You know how much hate mail myself, Adam, April, the rest of us just get every week for being honest and telling the truth? Do you know how much? Like these people that live a privileged life that talk about how they don't, and then go on and write books about how to be a better white friend to black people. What? You don't even know what it's like to be a person, let alone a white person or black person. Ticks me off so bad. Ticks me off so bad. You know? And then you got all the Karen. Because what is that? Because isn't Karen, like if you look up slang for Karen, isn't it now, I would think it's just a racist, it's a descriptor for a middle-aged white woman who's nitpicking or something like that. I'm sure we could find some slang definition for it. Well, they called her a Karen. Does that mean they're labeling her race? Shouldn't they be fired? Shouldn't they have their feet raised over the fire or whatever the expression would be? I don't care. I really don't. And I'm not going to try to censor it down. For a long time, we kind of lost our way in what Wake Up America was supposed to be. Wake Up America is telling you to wake up. If I ever have content that's too hot for television, too hot for social media, I own my own live streaming platform. Yeah, sure, you're not going to be able to watch it unless you go over there, or unless you're a member if you want to watch it live. Otherwise, wait an hour and then it's live there anyway. But I'm done holding back. You're going to see a new type of show that's starting tonight because I'm done. What is this? What do I hear? I'm hearing audio. Where's the audio from? Where is the audio from? You guys can't hear it. Or maybe you can. No, can't. Where? But why? So yeah, you may want to, if you haven't already, you may want to watch tonight's show. Well, you haven't watched it yet because I haven't put it out yet. Is this it? You can hear it. So what is that from? Found it. Found it. It took me a long time to be able to find it, but I found it. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to switch over to the Jen Psaki. So that's live at 8 o'clock tonight. I have a phone call. I'm 6 minutes late to make. So I have to make that phone call. So I'm going to switch over. Jen Psaki should be live. I'm going to stay live on social media at least until Jen Psaki's done with her press conference, and I'll probably switch right to the Senate after that. The Senate is going to be live at 2 o'clock, or the House is going to be live at 2, the Senate at 3. So, stay with us. Every now and then I may chirp in and be like, or something like that. Okay, something like that. But make sure we're shadow banned on social media. So at 8 o'clock, wherever you're watching this right now, come back to that page. Click on my name if you're watching on Facebook, Citizen Stringer TV or Citizen Stringer app. Click on that name, follow that page, come back at 8 o'clock every night. It's not going to send you notifications. They don't like me. They don't want you to hear what I have to say. You have to try to watch the show. That's the only way you're going to be able to watch it, is by making an effort. So make sure you tune in 8 o'clock Eastern tonight. That's Eastern time. That's not Pacific time because, well, California would be there and everybody hates California.
upcoming vacation. It'll be a long one. What gym are you going to? I'm going gold. But after my first game with the council, and find one couple later.
Oh, good. Yes. We increased the average rear hips for
Yeah. Most. I said as an average, it was more than that. Yeah, there was easy, I got people in here. You know, so that's for the guys under there.
Yeah, I assume she's for
Hi, everyone. Hello. Happy Monday. Okay. Even as we are facing an inflection point clearly this week, I wanted to take the opportunity to just remind everyone, specifically in the public, of what we're talking about in these packages and why the president is fighting so hard to get his agenda forward. So, included in these packages that the president is fighting to move forward on with leadership, we are working to lower the excruciatingly high cost of prescription drugs, which, by the way, over 80% of the American public supports. We're also working to make historic investments in crumbling roads and bridges, which over 80% of Americans support. We're working to pass historic tax cuts for middle-class families. 50 million Americans would get their taxes cut, 4 million small businesses. We're working to stop our children from drinking poison drinking water and get every American access to high-speed internet, people in cities and rural communities who haven't had access over the past several years, which over 75% and 66% of Americans endorse, respectively. We're working to cut the skyrocketing cost of childcare, something that is preventing millions of women, or hundreds of thousands of women at least, perhaps, from going back into the workforce. And we're working to take on the devastating impacts of climate change that we're already seeing do terrible damage to our economy and national security. So even as we're having important debates about timelines and reconciliation processes and parliamentary processes, I just wanted to take a moment and remind everybody what this is all about. But Zeke, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. You didn't mention the end of the fiscal year, the expiration of government funding, as well as the debt limit. Is the president making calls to Republicans or White House aides reaching out to Republicans to encourage them to back that this year on?
We are certainly engaged with a broad range of members and their offices about moving every component forward. And it was not an intentional oversight. I was trying to add the components of the reconciliation package and the infrastructure bill, which sometimes gets shorthanded. But I'm happy to talk about raising the debt ceiling as well, or preventing a government shutdown if useful.
Just on a different topic, was the White House involved in brokering the prisoner swap between China and Canada on Friday? And then also, does this sort of deal incentivize China to sort of unjustly seize foreign nationals as sort of international geopolitical leverage?
Well, first, we'd not refer to it in those terms. We would refer to it as, one, an action by the Department of Justice, which is an independent Department of Justice. This is a law enforcement matter as it relates to specifically the Huawei official who was released. So this is a legal matter. I would note that the president and every member of our administration, national security officials who have had contacts with Chinese officials over the past 9 months, have made clear that they want to see the release of the two Michaels and, of course, any American who is not able to leave China.
So, so was the White House involved in the freeing of the two Michaels?
We make the case consistently at every level, and we have for some time now, including in the president's call with President Xi about the importance of these two individuals returning back to their home.
And the action here, deferring the charges linked to the release of the two Canadians, doesn't that create sort of an incentive structure that would give China more reason to do this sort of thing again?
Well, I think it's important to note and to be very clear about this. There is no link. We have an independent Justice Department. We can't determine how the Chinese or others manage their business over there. It's a little bit different, but we have an independent Justice Department that made independent decisions, law enforcement decisions. At the same time, we have made no secret about our push to have the two Michaels released. That's certainly positive news and good news.
And just on the different topic briefly, on the boosters, the president got his booster a couple minutes ago. Are White House staffers getting boosters as well as the White House proper considered one of those high-risk settings like healthcare, grocery stores, and the like?
Sure. Well, the CDC, as you all know, just released this information or these recommendations, this guidance on Friday, and so there hasn't been a determination made. But I will note, since you gave me the opportunity, it's pretty clear, this is one of the reasons the president conveyed this as well, exactly what this means. People who are 65 years and older, they can look at their vaccine cards. If it's been more than 6 months and they had the Pfizer shot, they should go get another shot. Long-term care residents and staff, people who are 18 years and older who have underlying medical conditions, including asthma, diabetes, obesity, there are others. And those who work and live in high-risk settings, including healthcare workers, teachers, grocery store workers who had the Pfizer shot, just look at your vaccine card. If it's been more than 6 months, you should go get a shot.
Who's going to make that determination about the White House complex? Is that a CDC decision? Is that a White House medical office, medical decision?
We follow CDC guidelines, but given the guidelines just came out on Friday, we're still making a determination about how it would be applied. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on Zeke for a minute about Huawei, I just wanted to ask how you would respond to allegations from congressional Republicans that the deferred prosecution agreement for the Huawei CFO amounts to capitulation and appeasement and calls into question Biden's ability to deal with the threat from China, that hostage-taking works with the United States, etc.
It may feel foreign to them that the Department of Justice is independent, but it is independent under this administration, and this is a legal matter. It was an announcement made by the Department of Justice, and it's inappropriate for me to weigh in on that further. What I would note, though, because I think there was a lot wrapped up in their criticism there, is that our policy has not changed. Our policy toward China. We're not seeking conflict. It is a relationship of competition, and we're going to continue to hold the PRC to account for its unfair economic practices, its coercive actions around the world, and its human rights abuses. And we will continue to do that in partnership with our allies around the world. We will also continue to engage with the PRC to keep channels of communication open to responsibly manage the competition and discuss potential areas of interest where those align. So there is absolutely zero impact. No one should read it as an impact on our substantive policy. This is a legal matter and a legal decision.
Just to quickly follow up, did President Biden discuss Huawei on his recent call with President Xi?
He raised the two individuals, the two Michaels, who have been released. Very positive news. It should not come as a surprise that President Xi raised the Huawei official. But again, there was no negotiation on this call. These two leaders raised the cases of these individuals, but there was no negotiation about it. It was President Biden raising and pressing again for the release of these two Michaels, as is something that happens in every engagement we do with the Chinese, or had up to this point in time. Go ahead.
Jen, you opened by talking about how popular the president's agenda is as reflected in these bills, prescription drugs and child care and climate change. If the president's agenda is so popular with the American people, why can't he find the votes to get it through Congress? And why hasn't he rallied public support, really, to get this done?
Well, I would say first, if public support is right around 80% for most of the initiatives, then public support has been rallied.
Okay,
As it relates to the politics of Washington, which sometimes the zip code we're all living in here operates disconnected from where the American public is. I think we can all evaluate that, or seen that happen over time. I noted that because it's important for people to understand this is what the American people want. Roads, rails, bridges, they are not Republican or Democratic. They are initiatives, they are improvements the American people want. People want improvements to childcare. They want their costs cut. They want the tax system more fair. So our zip code here is sometimes a little out of whack with what the public wants. That's why I noted those pieces. I would also say, though, that what we're trying to do is hard. The president knows that. Nothing is guaranteed. And we are working, as you just heard him say, he's an optimist by nature, but he's going to work this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, to do everything he can to engage with Democrats, with people with a range of positions to get this agenda moved forward.
Democrats are obviously in control of the government, so it's not the zip code, it's the party. And he's the leader of the party.
Well, you asked me first about the popularity of these initiatives and why there weren't more votes broadly, which is a good question, but that's what I was answering to you. Look, I would again say that what we know is among Democrats, there is broad agreement about the need to cut costs for childcare, the need to invest in roads and rails and bridges, make us more competitive, make our tax system more fair, address the climate crisis. There are disagreements around what the size of this package looks like. We understand that. That's what the discussion is in part about. Again, he's not naive about how challenging this is. He's been through a few of these rodeos before, and so what we're focused on right now is working in lockstep with leadership to move the agenda forward and get it over the finish line.
And just one question on the President's booster and this display you have here. Is it partly a concern that after all the back and forth on the advice and guidance from the government, people are confused about the booster and maybe even more doubtful about it?
Well, I would say the reason we did this chart is because sometimes it's self-perpetuating. If everybody here is saying it's confusing, then people are going to think it's confusing. And so what I'm trying to do is alleviate the confusion, right? And explain these are exactly the categories. Anyone who's had a Pfizer shot 6 months ago, go get another shot. If you took Moderna or J&J, they're still considering that data. Don't get the shot yet, not approved yet. So we want to do everything we can to alleviate any confusion, answer questions people have. President went and got his shot, his booster shot on camera to make clear it's safe, it's effective, it's something you should do if you're in one of these categories. Go ahead.
Has Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema made clear to the president what their specific demands are for this reconciliation package?
I certainly understand your question, Caitlin, but I'm not going to speak on their behalf about what where they stand at this point in time.
Have they told the president, though, what their price tag is?
I will let them speak for what their points of view are. There have been ongoing discussions. We've been in close contact with them, as well as a range of members about the path forward.
Without saying what they are, you can't just say if they've actually told the president, here's where we
will let them speak for what conversations they've had privately. We're not going to provide more detail from here.
Okay, and what is your understanding on what happens to the CDC and the FDA's work on the pandemic if the government loses funding this week?
Well, let me first say that it is never a good thing for the government to shut down, and that is why we are doing everything we can to prevent that from happening. Because a great deal of public health, if not all of it, most of the public health work would be exempted from a government shutdown, but that doesn't change the fact that having services shut down, staffing cut in different agencies is not in the interests of addressing any crisis we face, including the pandemic.
So will they continue to work at 100% when it comes to the pandemic response, or what is the preparation for that?
Well, we, of course, as I noted and confirmed last week, we had begun making contingency plans, as every government does, as every Office of Management and Budget does, to plan. But again, public health officials, for the most part, would be exempt. But government shutdowns also are hugely costly. They would include the cutting of staff at a range of agencies. That's not a positive thing, obviously. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. President Biden mentioned that this evening he'd be meeting with Democrats, as I'm sure he'll be doing all week.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can share about, it's not me this time.
It's okay.
Anything you can share
No
about,
one even remembered that until you brought it up. There you go.
about who he's meeting with, whether those meetings will be in person or on the phone?
Sure. Understand your interest. Let me just tell you that, one, we all ate our Wheaties this morning. I expect that's going to be the breakfast all week, and things are constantly changing every day and certainly even every hour. And we are evaluating. The president has some space in his schedule to make calls, to bring people down here. We're not that far from the Hill. So we will keep you abreast as these details are finalized, but we're working through that now, and I expect that will be the case for the coming days.
And then publicly, progressives like Congresswoman Jayapal, Senator Sanders have said they are open to hearing what somebody wants to cut from the reconciliation package when asked about a figure lower than 3.5. Does the White House agree that something has to go, or can all of the proposals remain but at a smaller scale?
I think this is exactly part of the discussion that's being had between members of not of all parties, I should say, but many members in the Democratic Party right now. And there are a range of options, but I'm just not going to outline those or detail those from here.
And then just one more on the vaccine mandate.
Sure.
The president said he's going to Chicago on Wednesday to encourage more businesses, but the last I checked, the OSHA rule was still in the rulemaking process.
Yeah.
Do you have any update on when that will be done so businesses can implement it, and when you think that will happen?
Well, there are a number of businesses that have already implemented it, even before, or already implemented, I should say, their own requirements, even before the OSHA rulemaking had happened. So, and some of those businesses are in Chicago. And United is an example, obviously. They implemented a vaccine mandate several weeks ago, and they now have had a huge increase in the number of employees who've been vaccinated. So what the president's going to continue to do is lift up private sector companies and businesses that have already put in place mandates, even as the rulemaking process is ongoing.
So there's no update on a timeline?
It's up. I would point you to OSHA. We knew it would take a little bit of time, given there are some very understandable and good questions by the business community. They want to ensure there's clarity when they put out the rules. But businesses can employ it. It's become more popular. It's been very successful in the vast majority of businesses that have implemented mandates.
Thanks,
Go ahead.
What leverage do you believe the president has in political or in terms of specific pieces of the legislation? What leverage does the president have with Democrats?
In terms of getting the agenda forward? Well, I would say, one, it's a hugely popular package. Each item in itself, that's why I went through some of the specifics here, has broad support among the American public. But I would also say that if you talk to most Democrats who are in Congress, most Democrats in the country, there's not disagreement about the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve. And there is agreement that we need to address the climate crisis, that we need to cut costs for childcare, for college, that we need to make it easier for women to rejoin the workforce. We need to rebuild and modernize our infrastructure. So there's agreement on that. There's a basic discussion that needs to happen or is ongoing. We're right in the weeds of it now on what the size of the package looks like. But I will also note, and we've done this a little bit over the past couple of days, but that this package, the reconciliation package, would cost $0. So what I'm saying, the case we're making here is that there needs to be agreement on the different components. There's broad agreement on the goals. And then there needs to be agreement on what the revenue pay-fors are. There's a range of options for revenue pay-fors. Clearly, the president has laid out the different areas that he would like to invest in, and all of that needs to come together. That's where we're in the weeds on now.
Is it a political problem for the president that he's having difficulty bringing together his own party?
First of all, we're in the process now. The president, again, doesn't underestimate how challenging getting all of these pieces of legislation forward is. We're in the middle of it right now, and there is broad agreement about the different components of his agenda. So what he's working to do now is unify the party around the path forward. That's what we're in the middle of. I don't think it's a little too early to evaluate how it's going to end.
You said it could go into next week? That's your expectation?
We'll see. Go ahead. I'll come back to you, Jay.
There's some reporting today that the White House and Democrats are considering, or at least looking at means testing for some of the items in the reconciliation bill. Is that something that you would consider?
Well, it depends on how you define what that exactly is, right? There are income requirements for a range of different components of the president's agenda, right?
College, for example, that was billed as something that would be available to all Americans.
Right, but I'm not going to negotiate all the specifics from here. I'm just going to give you just a broad case understanding of how we've already approached things to date. Depends on how you're describing exactly what that is, right? We don't give the child tax credit. Every family is not eligible for the child tax credit in the country. Every person is not eligible for the earned income tax credit. There are income requirements for a variety of components. So there are some who have proposed that. Obviously, the president, there are components, as you can see from his past agenda, where there has been income tops on some components of his agenda, but beyond that, there are ongoing discussions right now.
Ruling out that could be added to some items that, as proposed, did not have income.
Well, again, I think you should look at the president's past proposals and what he's supported in the past, where there has been prioritization in the past in some areas for components of his agenda that made it have an income cap, so that we could expand the scope of who could get it without it being to the highest income.
And just one more, as he sat down with Prime Minister Modi last week, the president said that the Indian press is better behaved than the U.S. press, and then he advised him not to take questions. Can you explain why the American president was criticizing U.S. reporters in that setting?
Well, I would note first that he took questions on Friday, and he took questions again today. And I think what he said is that they're not always on point. Now, I know that isn't something that anyone wants to hear in here, but what I think he was conveying is, today he might want to talk about COVID vaccines. Some of the questions were about that. He might want to talk about, and some of the questions are not always about the topic he's talking about in that day. I don't think it was meant to be a hard cut at the members of the media, people he's taken questions from today and on Friday as well. Go ahead.
It happened that he was sitting next to Prime Minister of India, one of the world's largest democracy, when he said that. It also followed the incident on Wednesday when he was sitting next to the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Is the president reticent to take questions when he's sitting next to a foreign leader in the Oval Office? Can we expect him to do that in the future?
Steve, he took questions earlier that day on Friday. He'd already taken questions that day. I think that was the context of his comments.
But obviously, again, the question
And he's
was,
taken questions standing next to a foreign leader many, many times in the past, and will continue to.
I want to ask you about what Republicans are pointing to in the analysis from the Joint Committee on Taxation. They say, according to, if I've read the chart correctly, more than 16% of taxpayers would see their taxes increase under the bill that's approved by the House Ways and Means Committee. Will the president sign that bill as it is coming out of that committee, or will he insist on the changes so that he will maintain his commitment that taxes won't go up on people making $400,000 a year?
I have not looked at the document or the report that you have put out. Obviously, the president, or that you have referenced, I should say, that the Republicans put out. Obviously, the president's commitment remains not raising taxes for anyone making less than $400,000 a year. There are some, and I'm not sure if this is the case in this report, who argue that in the past, companies have passed on these costs to consumers. I'm not sure if that's the argument being made in this report. We feel that that's unfair and absurd, and the American people would not stand for that. But I will take a closer look at this report and get you a more substantive response. Go ahead, Jackie.
Thanks, Jen. Going back to the Friday meeting with the Prime Minister, the President said that the Indian press was better behaved than the U.S. press, but the Indian press is ranked 142nd in the world, according to Reporters Without Borders, for press freedoms. I mean, how does he say that about the U.S. press compared to the Indian press?
Well, I would just say to you that having now worked for the president, serving in this role for 9 months, having seen that he's taken questions from the press more than 140 times, including today and Friday, that he certainly respects the role of the press, the role of the freedom of free press. We ensure that we have press with us, of course, when we travel, that we have press with us for sprays in foreign capitals, and we will continue to. And I think that should speak to his commitment to freedom of press around the world.
I want to go back to the border on Friday. The Secretary of Homeland Security said that 12,000 migrants were released into the U.S. to have their cases heard by an immigration judge. 2,000 were expelled via flights. But we now have another group of migrants that's crossed the southern border of Mexico, could end up on the U.S. Southern border within the next month or so. So does the White House believe the message of deterrence, border is closed, do not come, is working?
Well, Jackie, the White House believes that, and the President believes that our immigration system is incredibly broken. And we saw a surge. We've certainly seen a surge of migrants come to the border recently. We saw a surge back in 2019. We saw a surge back in 2014. Until we fix the system and we have a more effective and operational immigration system, until we have an asylum processing system that works at the border, we're going to continue to see cyclical challenges like this. And we've seen them across Democratic and Republican presidents. So our objective continues to be not just addressing, obviously, the challenges we saw in Del Rio last week, but working with Congress to get immigration reform passed so we can fix the broken system and ensure we can have a better operational process moving forward.
Going to get fixed when the immigration bill has been, stalled in Congress since the president took office. It's been tough to even get something like roads and bridges passed. That's coming to a head this week. How is that going to work when there's also this backlog of 1.3 million cases that are waiting to be heard, and on average it's taking 2.5 years for cases to be processed from the notice to appear to the case completion. That's almost double from a year ago. So what tools is the president going to use, because Congress is very slow right now?
Well, we would argue that for all of those Republicans who are standing at the border and giving speeches about how broken the system is, why don't you join us and be a part of the solution instead of relying on speeches? Because we can work together and get immigration reform passed and make the system work and make it operational. Well, we can have border restrictions that make sense. We can have a humane system that ensures that people can apply for asylum in an equitable way. That's something we all agree the system is broken. I think the question is who's going to work with us to get changes done to make it better.
Republicans are saying that a major reason that this bill can't move is because there's not enough border security provisions in it. Is the president going to bolster border security in order to pass immigration reform?
If Republicans are eager to have a conversation about comprehensive immigration reform, we're happy to have that conversation. We haven't seen any willingness or appetite to do that. All we've seen is speeches and talking points to date. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Just to go back to the Huawei case for a second, you said there's no link between that and the release of the two Michaels, but China has long linked those two things, and given her release and the timing of their release, and it was a long-standing ask from the Chinese side, how do you communicate clearly that it wasn't a concession to them?
Well, our system clearly works differently from the Chinese system. We understand that. How we communicate it clearly is to reiterate that this was a legal decision made by the Department of Justice. They can speak to the reasoning. They can speak to their decision-making process. But I would also reiterate that we are still pleased to see, of course, the release of the two Michaels, something we have been pressing for as our neighbors to the north have been pressing for, and others around the world for some time. Our Justice Department is independent. They make independent legal decisions, and we will continue to reiterate that. I would also say that there has been some assessment that this means a change in our China policy. That is absolutely not the case. This was a legal decision. Our policy and our approach to policy, our intention to hold China to account for its unfair economic practices, its coercive actions around the world, hold it to account on human rights abuses has not changed. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. In all these calls that are happening this week with Congress, I was just wondering, how much is the president still kind of in a listening mode, listening to what members want, versus as a leader of the party, kind of in directing the members of the party? I mean, kind of piggybacking on Kelly's question about using leverage as president of the United States to force them maybe a bit to get on board with his agenda.
I don't know if you've met many senators. They're not going to be forced to do anything that's not in their interest. So I understand there's a little bit of that churn out there, but the president's been at this a long time. 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president. He's been pretty effective to date at moving legislation forward, including when there was skepticism about his ability to get that done. As I've said many times, but it's just worth reiterating, he is not naive about the challenge here and how challenging this is to get these two big pieces and historic pieces of legislation across the finish line. So yes, the conversations are not just about him silently listening. I can assure you all of that. He is not a wallflower. He is engaging in conversations. He's having discussions with leaders. He's looking to chart a unifying path forward. And there's a give and take and a back and forth in those conversations, absolutely. He's working to help unify the caucus to get to a conclusive outcome here.
Well, if I could just ask a follow-up, not a follow-up, pardon me, on a different subject about China. Bloomberg actually is reporting about a U.S.-led competitor to China's Belt and Road. Can you address that? Is the United States working on an alternative to Belt and Road, aside from what it is doing with Europe, a U.S.-based...
Aside from Build Back Better World?
Besides Build Back Better World. And how would that work? And is the White House looking for projects in Latin America to do this?
It's a great question. Obviously, Build Back Better World I referenced because it is an initiative that, obviously we worked with the G7 and other leaders to begin to implement around the world and build that infrastructure around the world. I'd have to check with our team and see. Not that I am aware of, but I will check and see if there's anything more to report on that.
Thank you, Jen. In New York State, there's an anticipated shortage of healthcare workers due to tens of thousands of them failing to comply with strict state vaccine mandates. I'm wondering if the Biden administration is learning anything from these New York mandates as it's drawing up its own federal version of them, and if there's any surprise by the number of people who haven't complied and haven't been vaccinated.
So, as it relates to New York, one, we are tracking that a number of states, New York is one of them, are beginning to implement, as they're beginning to implement requirements, they're taking steps to work with healthcare systems to ensure that they have alternatives that they can backfill as needed. And that certainly is something we support, that some states like New York are doing. I would note that when this decision writ large was made, and this is the reason we did it on a federal level, right? It was because healthcare workers who've been on the front lines of this pandemic for a year and a half now were feeling at risk for their health, for their lives, for their children's lives, and also it was creating a great deal, not a bit of a lesser concern, but one for hospital associations for disruptions of workers, right? People were having to take off sick time and even worse, of course. So this was a step that was taken in order to address that, to create certainty for these healthcare workers and also these systems. We have seen in a number of places around the country, the Methodist Hospital in Houston, which was one of the first organizations to implement a vaccine requirement, that they lost only 153 out of 25,000 employees. That means of the implementation of the vaccine mandate, I should say. That means less than 1% quit over a vaccine requirement. And new employment data out of Maine showed that only 65 people out of 33,000 healthcare workers quit their jobs over a vaccine requirement. Henry Ford Health System in Detroit went from 68% vaccinated to 98%. So point is, we're seeing in a lot of places that this is working, it's effective, it's creating more certainty and protection in their workforces. There are places where they are contingency planning to ensure they're backfilling. We certainly support that as well. We stay in touch with them about the steps that they're taking, but we still continue to believe that putting in place these mandates for businesses over 100 workers is something that is a positive step for the workforce, for the country, and for a lot of these businesses, as these business leaders can attest to as well.
Is there anything sort of special about the New York rules? I mean, if, for example, there's not a religious exemption even there that the Biden administration might be looking at and thinking this might be a little bit too strict for what we would want to do nationally? Because it is a much bigger, I mean, to your point, most of those places that you mentioned are having tiny, sort of like, amounts of people leaving, but New York seems to be an exception.
Sure. I know that obviously OSHA and as they're working to do the rulemaking that Weija asked about earlier, they're looking at a range of ways to make this as efficient, as clear for businesses as humanly possible. We've talked a little bit about the expectation of an exemption for a religious exemption, which is something certainly they'll look at. And I'm sure they will look at how it's applied to different health systems across the country, as well as businesses and how they have applied it across the country in the private sector where it's already been implemented as well. So they'll look at all of that. Their objective is to make this clear, but I think it's also important to note that in the vast majority of places, it's actually been quite effective. There's been a very, very small percentage of people who have left the workforce as it's been mandated.
And then just on one other topic. There's a group of about 40 Americans who are still alive from the Iranian hostage crisis, who are supposed to be paid from a fund that Congress approved. President Biden was vice president at the time that this law was passed. This money has been depleted, and I just wanted to see if the president supports rewriting this law at all to cover these individuals who didn't get their due, and whether he believes justice has been done by these individuals.
It's a good question. I know you guys have followed this closely from the Post. I'll have to check with our team, our legislative team, and just see kind of where we stand with that. And I'll talk to him about it too. Go ahead.
Back on the Hmong release for a moment. So the president spoke, Jen, with President Xi, I think on September 9th. The agreement that ultimately led to Ms. Hmong's release was about 10 days later. Was he aware at the time, even if he did not discuss it with President Xi, about what the status of the discussions were?
In terms of the Department of Justice, I don't have any more detail on that.
So we don't know whether he knew. Do you know when he first learned that there was?
I just don't. I'm not trying to be cute with you. I don't have any more detail on it. I'm happy to check if there's more I can convey.
Okay. A second question on all of this. You said that it wouldn't have any effect on our overall China policy. We haven't heard the president very much during the time that he's been in office about Huawei itself. And obviously part of the effort here in reaching this agreement was to get a statement that would help with the criminal case against Huawei. How does the president assess that the campaign against Huawei is going right now?
Well, I have not spoken with him about his view on the campaign against Huawei. What I will tell you, and just reiterate, is that this was a legal decision. It does not change our view, this administration's view, or his view, as it relates to our concerns about economic practices, coercive actions, and in fact, the actions that were admitted to by this individual. I mean, those type of actions. So it does not change our policy. It does not change our approach to policy. It does not change our concerns with some of the practices we've seen from the government and leaders within China as it relates to economic action.
I'm trying to get something a little bit different, which is, does the president believe that the initiatives you have underway that contain Huawei spread through Latin America, Africa, elsewhere, are actually yielding results in the first 9 months of his presidency? You've seen them win some big contracts. You've also seen them have a very difficult time getting a lot of the semiconductors and other parts they need.
I'd have to check with our team on an assessment of that, David. It's a totally fair question.
And a last question for you, which has to do with Iran. The foreign minister of Iran, the new foreign minister, was in New York last week. He said that they were less interested in the details of what a revived JCPOA agreement said, and much more interested in making sure that they got the sense of all the benefits from sanctions relief that they believe actually back to President Obama they did not, even after the agreement was signed. Is it President Biden's view at this point that if you do get back into the agreement, that Iran has to see more benefit than it actually got back after the 2015 agreement was reached?
You mean receive more benefits than they received back in the last administration?
Not on paper, but in reality. The Iranian complaint essentially was companies were still too reluctant to do business with them.
I think, David, where we are is we're still quite a few steps away. And so we are eager, of course, to go back and have discussions, diplomatic discussions in the next round of negotiations. They may not be interested in all the details. We certainly are interested in all the details, but I just am not in a position to assess what that will look like at this point in time. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Does the White House have any reaction from news today that John Hinckley, who of course attempted to assassinate President Reagan 4 decades ago, will be granted unconditional release effective next June?
I don't have any response. I'm happy to check and see if we have one from here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was calling on him. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So sorry.
Oh, right. It's okay. Go ahead.
Today marks 4 weeks since the last U.S. troops left Afghanistan, and since then the U.S. has helped at least 160 Americans and U.S. residents leave, but thousands more green card holders and at-risk Afghans remain. Does the White House think that that's an acceptable rate of getting people out, and how do you measure success?
Well, our objective was at the time and continues to be to work with our partners in the region, including the Qataris and others in neighboring countries, to ensure there are movement of flights and that flights are back up and operational. We have seen many people depart, and that we expect and hope will be ongoing. We knew that we needed to take a number of steps to work with the international community to ensure there's continued pressure that the Taliban would abide by their commitments, and we also knew that we needed to get the flights up and going. The flights have been up and going, and so far we've moved some people over land. We're working with our partners in the region to continue to get more people out who want to depart.
Is the White House happy with how quickly things are moving?
Our objective is to continue to make progress, and I think we're doing exactly that, and the State Department, of course, is leading this effort. Go ahead.
The Education Secretary supports mandatory vaccinations for students if they're eligible for a COVID vaccine. Does the White House agree with that? Does the White House believe that all students should be vaccinated before they go to school?
Well, we've always felt it would be up to local and district school districts to make that determination. Certainly, we support more people getting vaccinated, more schools and superintendents and leaders taking steps to protect their communities. But our view is it will continue and should continue to be up to schools and local school districts.
It's not a federal requirement at this step.
We have not put in place one. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So taking you back in time to Friday, as President Biden was meeting with Prime Minister Modi, the Prime Minister of Pakistan took to the stage at the UN and delivered some scathing criticism of the U.S.'s actions in Afghanistan. And he's lamented the lack of direct engagement between himself and President Biden. So I was just wondering why hasn't the President used this aggressive diplomacy to answer that call from the Prime Minister of Pakistan to engage directly?
To be in touch directly with the leader of Pakistan? We have been in touch at very high levels with leaders in Pakistan, from the State Department, from the Department of Defense, and from other key components of the administration. The President has not spoken with every foreign leader at this point in time. That is absolutely true. But he, of course, has a team, an expert team deployed to do exactly that. So I would say that we are continuing to work together and work on initiatives where we can, make clear where we have concern, but I wouldn't overread into a leader-to-leader call in that particular regard. We have high-level engagement from the State Department, the Defense Department, and others at this point in time.
Point soon?
I don't have anything to predict at this point in time. If they do a call, we will, of course, read it out to all of you. Go ahead, Yumish.
Thanks, Jen. A question on the pressure the president's facing. The president said today that victory is at stake this week. Can you explain more about what he meant there, and also what pressure is he feeling as Democrats face this sort of intense legislative week?
Well, I would say he said that at the end of several questions, just to give the full context, when it was like, what is at stake? And he said, victory's at stake. I don't think he said it quite exactly in the same tone that you conveyed, which is okay. But look, the president is very committed to this agenda. He laid it out back in the spring. He thinks that it's far past time to rebuild our roads, rails, and bridges. He thinks it is far past time to ensure we are doing what's needed to address the climate crisis. He thinks it's far past time to lower costs for working families, whether it's childcare, the cost of college, elder care, that are impacting millions of families across the country. That's what the stakes are. The stakes are for the American people. That's what he's focused on. We are, of course, going to continue to work with Democratic leadership, and our objective is to win both of these votes and get this agenda move forward.
And I know you're not going to negotiate from the podium, but can you say anything about what the president's message is to his own party as he tries to bring together progressives and moderates?
His message is, let's get together, let's get to work, and let's get this done for the American people.
Can I ask you one quick question on the Haitian migrant issue?
Sure.
Can you talk a bit more about the need to continue to use Title 42 and why that's so important to this administration? And also overall with the Border Patrol, Horse Patrols, they've been using those horses for a very long time. Is the Biden administration going to continue to use those horse patrols throughout the rest of the country? I know they're temporarily suspended in Texas, or Del Rio, Texas, rather.
They are temporarily suspended in Del Rio, Texas. I think what Secretary Mayorkas talked about a bit when he was here on Friday is the fact that when these horse patrols are used effectively, they often can help people who are in distress. That's something they do. They can find people. There is a reason that these horse patrols have been in place and continue to be in place in some parts across the country. Of course, our Department of Homeland Security will continue to look at and assess, especially as the investigation concludes, what that looks like. They've been suspended in Del Rio, Texas. That was a step in response, of course, directly to those horrific photos. But beyond that, I think it's important to note that, as the Secretary said, the vast majority of the Border Patrol and the Horse Patrol are doing their job, and they're doing their job effectively. Of course, we are going to assess and we are going to call out when we see occasions, as we did with the photos and the video last week, that don't meet our bar, that bring out strong emotions for good reason from people within this administration and around the American public.
And when you clarified about the victory is at stake, could you just explain a little bit more what you mean by that? I just want to make sure that the context is clear when the president said victory is at stake, what you see him as meaning there.
He means victory for the American people. Victory in lowering the cost of childcare, lowering the cost of elder care, rebuilding our roads, rails, and bridges, becoming more competitive with China, investing in our climate crisis.
Not victory for his agenda per se, not victory for...
Well, that is his agenda. Okay. They're mutually the same. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Does the president have a specific position on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that passed the Senate and is awaiting consideration in the House? And then, in a recent interview with Bloomberg, John Kerry seemed to suggest that in talks with the Chinese, this administration sees human rights and climate change as two separate issues. He said, yes, we have issues, a number of different issues, but first and foremost, this planet must be protected. Is it the president's view that climate change is first and foremost over, a host of other issues?
Well, to be fair, I think what the Secretary was conveying is what I just conveyed about our China policy, is that we are going to continue to speak out where we have concerns, whether it's their economic approach, whether it's human rights issues, which we will raise privately and we will also raise publicly. But we will also look to work with the Chinese on areas where we can, and obviously climate is one of them.
And specifically on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, does the president have a position?
I will check with our legislative team. Obviously, he's spoken out about his concerns about the treatment of Uyghurs in the past, but let me check on the specific piece of legislation.
You touched on this, but I'm wondering, the El Paso Times has walked back their claim that border agents were using whips to deter Haitian migrants. This is kind of a controversy. Some people are weighing what is a whip versus what is a rein. And the El Paso Times put out a clarification saying it was not an actual whip. Does that change anything for the administration in light of the statements that were made last week?
I don't think anyone could look at those photos and think that was appropriate action or behavior or something that should be accepted within our administration. There's an investigation that's ongoing. We'll let that play out, but our reaction to the photos has not changed. Okay.
Jen,
Thank you,
I have a
everyone.
question. On the polling, the president's polling continues to collapse. Is he
Emerald, I
aware
know
of
you
that?
like
How
to
does he
shout
feel
at the
about
end.
it?
Next time we'll do it during the briefing. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Guys, I'm on hold with our power company trying to get power turned on in the new office. So I'm not saying anything. All right. This should begin at 3 o'clock. I just wanted to get it queued up because I got to go get my kids here in a few minutes anyway. But Senate should convene. The House is already recessed for the day. 22 minutes on hold so far. It's crazy. You guys probably hear that talking. Let me put it over there so it's not overwhelming. You guys want to know the downsides of living in a small town for a few minutes? Because I got a few minutes before I got to go pick them up. And I'm going to keep doing that every now and then to make sure they didn't pick up the phone. Downsides to the small town is we don't have, for our water department in our small town, we don't have like an online profile or something so you could see what your water bill is. They just mail it to you. You have no idea. Now, we've had some problems with our mail, and I don't know if it's because, I don't know what it is, but we've had some problems getting mail delivered here. Like my driver's license, we use this thing called, it's by the Postal Service, informed delivery is what it's called. And it tells you what mail you're getting for that day, right? So last week, I think it was Wednesday, my driver's license was in the mail, and it was supposed to be delivered on Wednesday. My wife brought the mail. We got everything else, not my driver's license. Because in this state, when you switch it over, you get a new driver's license and they mail it to you. So my driver's license didn't come. You know what apparently also didn't come was a disconnect for the water. So I went to actually do the dishes while Jen Psaki was talking because it makes me want to vomit when she speaks. Yes. Yes. Hold on 1 second, please. Anyway, like I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, they put me back on hold. So as soon as they come back on. So long story short, I did what any respectable human being would do when they didn't get a notice that their water was going to be shut off. I called the town and completely flipped out on them, and because we never got a notice. And so I went down, paid, put it on auto debit because apparently I didn't. But then I asked, I'm like, you don't have like some sort of online portal, or you don't send any mail? And she's like, oh, we sent letters. And I'm like, no, you didn't. She's like, yeah, we did. I'm like, you didn't. We get all our mail. Well, we should. So I'm actually going to be going to the post office and yelling at them, because that's a big deal, and it's already turned on. That's a good part about water. You guys didn't even know when Jen Psaki was gone. I went all the way to the water department, and sorry, I'm on hold, so I got to wait for them to come back and all that stuff. But long story short, it was fixed. So the hell was that? Oh, I got to go pick up my kids. All right, so at 1 o'clock, or I'm sorry, 3 o'clock, the Senate is going to convene. So I'm going to leave the live stream on and go from there. But yeah, look at multitasking. I'm talking on the show. I'm on hold with the water company. Next, I got to get internet turned on, so I'm going to try to do that as soon as I get back. And if I get internet turned on, I can move in there soon. This is what I'm doing, is the electric there. Because the only thing I have to do is water and electric, and then my new office will be complete. Now I'll just have to set it up. And you guys are going to like the studio section, man. It's got like a brick background. It's not fake either. It's real. It's going to be nice, man. It's going to be nice. It's got a room that I'm going to store the coffee. It's cold and cool and concrete. So that's going to be our coffee room. And then the whole front right-hand side, left-hand side is going to be 2 print stations for our t-shirts. And then on the left-hand side will be like racks and stuff to sell. The back room. Hello? All right, hold on one second. Hold on real quick. All right, guys, I'll be back at 3:15 after I pick up my kids. We'll see ya.
The Senate will come to order, and the chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, who makes the crooked places straight, continue to guide our lawmakers as they seek to walk with wisdom and integrity. May they embrace your wisdom, which is pure, gentle, considerate, merciful, productive, peaceful, and sincere. Lord, lead them on a path of integrity that strives to keep a clear conscience before you and humanity. Inspired by your unconditional love, empower our senators to achieve a faithfulness that will cause people to glorify your name. Provide our legislators with the courage to turn from evil as you do for them more than they can ask or imagine. We pray in your righteous name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. President,
The Senator from Hawaii.
I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
Madam President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Well, Madam President, after today, I ask
Mr.
unanimous
Majority Leader,
consent
we're
the
in a
quorum be
quorum.
dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, after today, there'll be no doubt which party in this chamber is working to solve the problems that face our country, and which party is accelerating us towards an unnecessary, avoidable disaster. Let me say that again without interruption. Madam President, after today, there will be no doubt about which party in this chamber is working to solve the problems that face our country and which party is accelerating us towards unnecessary, avoidable disaster. At the end of last week, I filed cloture on proceeding to the continuing resolution sent to us by the House of Representatives, which, among other things, would prevent a government shutdown and suspend the debt limit so we can pay for our debts incurred during the previous administration. In a few hours, we will vote on cloture on the motion to proceed to this bill. The Democrats will do the responsible thing, the right thing, the thing that's been done for decades by both parties, and vote yes. Now, if Republicans follow through with their plans to vote no, they will be on record deliberately sabotaging our country's ability to pay the bills and likely causing the first ever default in American history. The consequences of a default would be, in the words of Secretary Yellen, catastrophic. The best case scenario is, the best case under this awful situation is that our country would fall into another recession, potentially erasing all the progress we have made to pull ourselves out of the COVID crisis. That is, if we're lucky. Otherwise, one analysis warned that default could hurt Americans for generations. For generations. Interest costs will be higher and not go down very quickly. And that has huge effects on so many different people, and that's only one of the effects of default. So I want my Republican colleagues to think carefully about the practical consequences of what they're doing. A default means, quite simply, the government cannot pay its bills. It means that suddenly the government is presented with unimaginable options. Do they tell seniors they won't get their Social Security checks, or veterans that they won't see their benefits, or tell our military they won't be getting paid? And the consequences on Main Street would be equally severe. A default would very likely send markets crashing and interest rates skyrocketing, making it harder for small businesses to make ends meet, for homeowners and renters to pay the bills, and for consumers to keep our economy going. All of the consequences, or so many of the consequences, can be boiled down into three frightening numbers: 6 million, 9, 15 trillion. 6 million jobs lost, 9% unemployment, 15 trillion in squandered household wealth. Let me say that again. Those are devastating numbers on so many households throughout America, just about every household. That's 6 million jobs lost, 9% unemployment, 15 trillion in squandered household wealth. Yes, that's what we're potentially looking at if Republicans get their irresponsible and reckless way. None of this needs to happen. None of it. The only reason we're here, the only reason this is even a possibility, is because Republicans are making this a possibility by preventing the government from paying its bills. It's an unhinged position to take, one that not long ago only the most radical elements of the Republican Party would have embraced. There's no scenario in God's green earth where it should be worth risking millions of jobs, trillions in household wealth, people's Social Security checks, veterans' benefits, and another recession just to score short-term, meaningless political points. That's what Republicans seem fixated on doing. Now, there's a very simple step we can take today to guarantee the government won't default and won't shut down. Both sides can come together to vote yes on today's vote and vote to pass the continuing resolution. Just as Democrats worked in a bipartisan fashion under the Trump administration, Republicans must now step up to the plate. To do otherwise is the height of recklessness, irresponsibility. Republicans say they don't want to see a government shutdown. They say they don't want to see our government default on our debt. Then they should vote yes. It's plain and simple. It's very clear. There's no obfuscation here. Crystal clear. Voting yes means avoiding default and avoiding a government shutdown. Voting no says, let's risk it. Let's risk it. By choosing to block today's resolution, Republicans are intentionally making default more likely. By blocking an extension of the debt limit, Republicans will solidify themselves for a long time as the party of default. I cannot emphasize that this isn't just another political game. We're facing a parade of horribles that will hurt every single American in this country. And it's important to remember that today's vote would also advance a number of priorities besides just funding the government and avoiding default, as important as those are. It would provide desperately needed emergency funding for millions of people affected by natural disasters from this summer, including hurricanes, wildfires, and flooding across Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. It would provide billions to help resettle Afghan refugees who risk their lives helping our troops abroad. Both sides claim they support these priorities, so the easy answer is to vote yes later today. Madam President, being elected to office means sometimes you have to do things to rise above partisan politics. It means we have an obligation to work together when our country faces an acute crisis. Tearing the barn down is easy. Building it up, preserving it, keeping it standing year after year takes hard work and cooperation. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in this chamber is how its members vote. Rest assured, Democrats will vote today to do the right thing. The American people will be watching whether or not our Republican colleagues choose to vote in favor of preserving our full faith and credit or vote in favor of an unprecedented default. I yield the floor. Note the app.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to H.R. 5305, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 137, H.R. 5305, an act making continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2022, and for providing emergency assistance and for other purposes.
President.
Republican leader.
I'm glad to share that a few minutes ago I received a booster vaccination for COVID-19. All throughout the pandemic, I've followed the best advice from experts and especially from my own healthcare providers. It was an easy decision to receive a booster. I'm a survivor of childhood polio from before vaccines. Before vaccines eradicated that disease here in our country and around the world now. So I've been a lifelong champion of vaccinations. Mountains of evidence tell us these shots are safe, effective, and dramatically shrink the odds of severe disease or death from COVID. Like I've been saying for months, these safe and effective vaccines are the way to defend ourselves and our families from this terrible virus. They're also how we stay on offense against COVID as a country. All Americans should speak with their doctors and get vaccinated. Now, on a completely different matter, it's not unusual for a presidency to have a rough spell. Every administration faces a stretch of time where nothing seems to go their way. But what we're witnessing today is entirely different. President Biden has not been dealt a bad hand by forces outside his control. This White House is not sailing through some unavoidable patch of choppy water. No, Democrats have steered our country straight into a storm of serious crises, all of their own making. On issue after issue, Americans are hurting because of specific policy choices that Democrats have made over the objections of people who actually knew better. Democrats did not inherit most of the painful inflation that is hammering working families. Their decisions have fueled it. Even liberal economists warned the president that runaway liberal spending could send costs soaring for the middle class. Now working Americans are paying dearly at the grocery store, at the gas station, practically everywhere that matters to families. And what are Democrats doing today? Putting together yet another reckless taxing and spending spree behind closed doors that would make inflation even worse. Now, President Biden did not inherit
mumbling Mitch McConnell.
He deliberately chose that as well. The Biden administration's own experts warned the White House
Is he saying?
that reckless withdrawal would embolden terror.
What's he talking about?
That keeps us safe.
I'm back.
But the president clung to his made-up deadline, handed huge momentum to the Taliban and their terrorist friends, and broke his explicit promise to leave no American behind who wanted out. As one former Democratic member of Congress said last week, the way the administration executed that withdrawal has been an utter and abject disaster. Democrats did not inherit this border crisis either. This security nightmare and human tragedy is yet another direct result of their own policies. President Biden and his allies spent 2 years campaigning on the concept of big government giveaways to people here illegally. Then they took office and began dismantling enforcement on the border. So what did they expect? Wave after wave.
What a the very mumbling Mitch. Introducing mumbling Mitch.
By the mirage the Democrats have set up, cruelly masquerading as compassion. Untold thousands of people have simply been released into our country with what amounts to a polite invitation to show up for a hearing. Even before the Biden surge, only about half of individuals actually showed up. One created crisis after another from our unified Democratic Party government. The latest additions are their confusion about how to fund the government and raise the debt ceiling. For more than 2 months now, Senate Republicans have been completely clear about how this process will play out. So let me make it abundantly clear one more time. We will support a clean continuing resolution that will prevent a government shutdown, get disaster relief to Louisiana, help properly vetted Afghan refugees who put themselves on the line for America, and support the Iron Dome assistance for our ally, Israel. We will not provide Republican votes for raising the debt limit. As we speak, Democrats are behind closed doors assembling a multi-trillion-dollar reckless taxing and spending spree. There's no chance Republicans will help lift Democrats' credit limit so they can immediately steamroll through a socialist binge that will hurt families and help China. There's no particular tradition that the minority will always vote for debt limit hikes during united government. When Republicans had unified control in the early 2000s, then Senators Biden and Schumer voted no on a debt limit increase and made the party in power handle it on their own. Exactly the situation we're in now. The roles were reversed. Bipartisanship is not a light switch that Democrats get to flip on when they need to borrow money and switch off when they want to spend money. The debt suspension that expired in August covered all the debt that had been accumulated to that point. This is an argument about the future. Democrats want to use this temporary pandemic as a Trojan horse for permanent socialism. They've all but said so. And that is what millions and millions of Americans elected 50 Republican senators to fight against. For 10 weeks now, 10 weeks, Democrats have known what kind of government funding legislation could pass the Senate and what kind would fail. Republicans are not rooting for a shutdown or a debt limit breach. We've given the united Democratic government total clarity about how each can be avoided. Republicans have explained exactly what kind of continuing resolution can pass the Senate with our support. And late last week, the House Democratic leader publicly said House Democrats are ready to swallow whatever CR the Senate can send them. So the House is ready. Senate Republicans are ready. We could have a bipartisan vote to fund the government today, if not for the odd tactics of the Senate Democratic leader. Before we vote this afternoon, I'll ask consent to strike the partisan CR that is dead on arrival and instead have the Senate vote on a clean, continuing resolution that could pass this chamber easily. We'll see if Washington Democrats actually want to govern or whether they want to add the prospect of a government shutdown to the list of inflation, Afghanistan, the border, and all the other national crises that are the direct results of their own decisions. I suggest you have the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
President.
Floor Leader,
I ask the quorum call be suspended.
without objection.
Madam President, you remember the day, you'll never forget it, January 6th. Here we were in this chamber in the process of voting the Electoral College votes. It was a pretty solemn occasion because this happens once every 4 years, and we have documents coming from the states telling us what happened in the election of last year for President of the United States. It's our job to make sure that those reports are documented and that the ordinary process of the democracy proceeds. This January 6th was not an ordinary day by any means. Before we set about our task here in the Senate and the House, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, held a rally claiming that, in fact, he didn't lose the election, that he won the last election. And he alleged all sorts of fraud and misconduct on the part of Democrats and others that resulted in this faulty report that somehow or another he had lost the election. Well, his crowd got so fired up that they decided to march on the Capitol as we were counting the Electoral College ballots. I can remember it well. Vice President Pence was sitting where you are, Madam President. We were going through the regular process, and it was a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, that door opened over there, and people came in suits I'd never seen before and literally yanked the Vice President off the podium and pulled him out that door. It was only a minute or two later that a member of the Capitol Police, the men and women who guard us and guard the visitors to this Capitol, member of the Capitol Police stood where you're sitting and reported to us that there was a demonstration outside and that we should remain in this chamber, in this Senate chamber, because they were going to make it a safe room in the Capitol. At that time, I noticed staff people were being brought in and lined up along the back of the room itself. It wasn't 10 minutes later till the same member of the Capitol Police stood up and said, change in plans, everybody leave as quickly as possible. And we all did, filing out toward the back of the room. Every member of the Senate, luckily the parliamentarian or some other office decided to grab the boxes with the Electoral College votes in them to preserve this important piece of history from possible mob action. As we were filing out of the Capitol, you couldn't help but look out the window and see the mobs coming on the Capitol, converging on the Capitol, carrying Trump signs. We went to a safe location and waited it out, and later that evening resumed our activities on the floor of the Senate, counted the votes, and made it official, with the Vice President present. It was an important part of history, and you would think that that would be enough of an embarrassment to President Donald Trump that he would drop his claims that the election was stolen. He's done just the opposite. He's intensified these false, malicious claims that somehow or another the vote was rigged or stolen or whatever his term might be, a fraud on the public, despite clear evidence to the contrary. And he pointed to a number of states that he said proved his point, where he just could not have lost. Donald Trump could not have lost these states. So clearly, he argues, something happened there that was criminal or wrong, and an investigation would show it. Well, one of those states was Arizona. Joe Biden carried Arizona by 10,000, roughly 10,500 votes. 45,000 of those votes came from Maricopa County, so it was obviously crucial to his win. And so the Republicans in Arizona decided they were going to zero in on Maricopa County and prove once and for all that Donald Trump didn't lose that county by 45,000 votes. Well, they went to great lengths to do it. First, they gathered all their right-wing groups and Trump's defenders and raised $5.7 million in donations. Then they hired a group with the unlikely name of, I'm looking for it here, something to do with ninjas. I'm sure it'll pop up. And this group, cyber ninjas. This group had no experience analyzing an election, and yet they turned over all the ballots from Maricopa County to them to recount. Well, they pursued many bizarre theories, one of which I think was promulgated by the ever-reliable Rudy Giuliani, that somehow or another there were bamboo fibers found in these election ballots, and those are an indication of wrongdoing and can track the conspiracy, maybe even to international sources. The cyber ninjas rolled up their sleeves, pulled in the boxes of ballots, and started the count. They were determined to prove once and for all that the result that was announced, that Biden carried the county by 45,000 votes, was wrong. And they proved it. Through all their hard work and all the money that was spent, it turns out the draft report from the company Cyber Ninjas found that there were 99 additional votes for Joe Biden rather than the number that was presented by the authorities, and 261 fewer votes for Donald Trump in Maricopa County. Just the opposite of what they predicted. Well, you would think that President Trump would at least be quiet, or maybe even acknowledge that he was wrong. Come on, you remember him. Here's what he said in a statement after the review was announced. He said, "The review has uncovered significant and undeniable evidence of fraud. Until we know how and why this happened, our elections will never be secure." Madam President, he just won't quit. And the problem, of course, is that so many Americans are buying it, primarily Republicans, increasing their numbers, believing his big lie about the election being stolen from him. God forbid this man could lose an election. Who would ever dream of that? He can't think of the possibility. And they're joining him in a chorus, despite hard evidence that proves time and time and time again that he lost. It was a spirited election. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and when it was all over, the American people made their choice. They accepted the reality of change. Now it's time for Donald Trump and his followers to do the same. I don't know if the Cyber Ninja Turtles or whoever they are going to go at it again, some other state, pick another state to do some investigation. More power to them. They're building up the majority for Joe Biden, just the opposite of what was predicted. Madam President, I'd like to speak on another topic, if I might. A separate place in the record with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Madam President, we're going to have a vote later this afternoon, and it's not an ordinary vote in the United States Senate. We're voting on what's called the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the acknowledgement of the government's debt. It looks backwards and says, over a period of time since we last expanded the size of the debt, we've incurred more debt, and therefore we have to acknowledge that, to acknowledge the new debt ceiling in order to establish that the United States is going to pay that debt, which of course we want a reputation for paying just bills. And in this situation, these were bills for debts incurred during the Trump administration. It should be a rather routine thing. In fact, one might make the argument that the Senate and the House should not even be involved in this acknowledgement. It is simple accounting and should be announced to the American people. But for the time being, it is subject to a vote in the House and the Senate, and that's where the problems arise. Senator McConnell, the Republican leader from Kentucky, is hoping that the American public will not clearly understand the gravity and the importance of this vote. He has announced that he is going to boycott this vote, and not a single Republican will vote to acknowledge the true debt of the United States of America. I don't know if he will be able to keep his word, whether every Republican senator will march blindly behind him. They did once before under the American Rescue Plan, when Joe Biden proposed that we do the things necessary to bring this pandemic to an end and get America back on its feet. Not a single Republican would vote for it. We passed Donald Trump's promised cash payment of $1,400 for every family in America. It was in the American Rescue Plan. The Republicans all voted against it. We passed the money, billions of dollars, so that we could actually administer the COVID vaccine across America. We had discovered the vaccines, but of course there's a huge infrastructure to make sure that they are safely administered to American people. That was in the American Rescue Plan, and all the Republicans voted against it. There was also a provision in there to deal with helping businesses reopen their doors. Saturday night in Chicago, I spoke to a restaurateur who told me about problems he had faced and the debts he incurred, and he finally is getting back on his feet once and for all. The American Rescue Plan helped businesses just like that across America, and every Republican voted against it, every one of them. Not a single Republican senator or House member would support that effort. Thank goodness we had enough Democratic votes to get it done. But now we face the debt ceiling, and we're getting the same threats from the Republicans that they are going to boycott the vote, march out of the room, and refuse to acknowledge the debt of the United States. This debt ceiling is absolutely essential to pay for decisions that have already been made, as I mentioned. This is for debt incurred during the Trump administration. And oh, lest you think that this fiscally conservative Donald Trump was a good Republican through his 4 years when it came to debt, think again. The greatest increase in America's national debt in any 4-year period in our history, 36% increase. Let me repeat, raising the debt ceiling has nothing to do with future spending. We're paying Donald Trump's bills. We're acknowledging what was done by the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, what was spent and now has to be repaid. This is about paying what we already owe, and it's also about averting an economic catastrophe. As a candidate, Donald Trump used to beg that he was, quote, king of debt. How about that, Mr. President? King of debt, what he says. Well, he proved it. His reckless spending as president with America's credit card added nearly $8 trillion to our national debt. $8 trillion. That is a third of the entire debt was incurred during the Trump administration. And now the Republicans, his party, refuse to acknowledge that debt and the fact that we have to pay it back. He racked up all that debt in 4 years. $2 trillion of that, incidentally, was spent on tax cuts for the richest people in America. Yes, that was the Trump plan, supported by the same Republicans who today are saying they won't even cast a vote to acknowledge that they did it. And it added to the deficit. 85% of the benefits of Trump tax cuts, supported by Senator McConnell and the Republicans, went exclusively to the top 10% of wage earners in America. The Senate passed those tax cuts all on their own through reconciliation. I will tell you this, I didn't vote for it. No Democrats voted for it. What we're doing today is paying the piper, acknowledging that this is a legitimate debt of this country. We can change policy going forward, but since we enacted those tax cuts 4 years ago, it's added to the national debt, and we acknowledge it today, and Senator McConnell and the Republicans refuse to acknowledge it. During Trump's one term in office, the national debt increased by almost 36%. 4 years, 36%. Our Republican colleagues voted to raise the federal debt ceiling once and to suspend it twice during Donald Trump. And the Democrats stood with them because we understood that this is just basic requirement 101 of constitutional government. We shared the responsibility not because we agreed with his policies, we don't, but because we understood that defaulting on the national debt could cause real damage to America. What would the costs of defaulting on our debt be exactly? According to some economists, we would see an estimated $15 trillion in household wealth wiped out, 2.6 million American jobs lost, a 9% unemployment rate. Every last American would feel the pain. If it continued for any period of time, it would threaten retirement funds, Social Security checks, even job security. Mark Zandi, pretty well-respected Moody's economist, warns that a default on America's debt would trigger financial Armageddon, sending markets into free fall and threatening America's status as a world's reserve currency. All because the Republicans refused to acknowledge debt they voted for and created under a Republican President Donald Trump. Even toying with the notion of default would have severe consequences. Back in 2011, the House Republicans initially refused to raise the debt limit. America's credit rating was downgraded because of it. The result? Higher borrowing cost, billions more to the national debt, and confidence in America shaken globally. We'll find out very shortly whether every Republican is going to follow the dictates of Senator McConnell when it comes to defaulting on America's debt for the first time. And we'll also see what the reaction to that is going to be. This measure we're going to vote on in about 2 hours suspends the debt ceiling to prevent the first default of debt in our nation's history and keeps the government open. Just that basic. After what we have been through and what we are going through with the pandemic, how can the Republicans play with this deadly economic strategy? Without a continuing resolution, the federal government will shut down in less than 4 days. With the Delta variant still taking 2,000 American lives a day, this is no time to shut down the federal government. With victims of hurricanes and floods and wildfires desperate for help, this is not the time to close the doors of the agencies that can help them. With our economy still recovering, now is not the time to damage it intentionally for political reasons. Right now, our number one priority is keeping the nation's economy on a path to recovery, helping families through a difficult time. We need to come together and fund the government. That is our fundamental responsibility. We need to pay our bills on time. We need to provide financial relief to Americans who are battling disasters, whether they're in California or Oregon or Louisiana or Illinois or Hawaii. And we need to grow our economy for future generations, increasing funding for childcare, education, health care, and reducing the expenses that average working families face every single day. President Biden's Build Back Better plan is a prudent investment in our economic future. It includes the largest middle-class tax cut in history. Do you know what the Republicans call the largest middle-class tax cut in history? Socialism. Socialism. I heard Senator McConnell say that. They just want to pursue socialism. The largest tax cut for working families and children in America in history. Unlike President Trump's tax giveaway to the rich, which Senator McConnell voted for and now doesn't want to pay for, the Build Back Better plan won't add to the debt. We'll pay for it by asking these same wealthy individuals and corporations to pay their fair share. No one, this is a promise by President Biden to be held to, no one who makes $400,000 a year or less will pay more in taxes. He's been pretty clear on that, hasn't he? So this notion that we're going through some socialist tax and spend scheme here just isn't true. 7 months after he signed his tax cut into law, Donald Trump told the effervescent Sean Hannity of Fox News, and he bragged, "When this tax cut really kicks in, we'll start paying off that debt like it's water." Quote, Donald Trump. That was a con. Now the bills are coming due, and the Republicans are racing for the exits. It's time to stop this ruse and fraud on the American people. We need to pay our bills, act responsibly, and actually help working families. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the evidence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Madam President.
Senator from Kansas.
Madam President, thank you. I rise this afternoon to...
The Senate is in a quorum call.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Then I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise this afternoon to bring further attention to the growing humanitarian and national security crisis we see at our southern border. President Biden and Vice President Harris's handling of the southern border has been as incompetent as it has been inhumane. This is not a partisan view. Their own special envoy to Haiti has resigned in protest. This administration is in denial. It's in denial about the scope of this crisis. Migrant crossing into the United States has already reached historic levels, and as I speak, thousands continue to arrive along our U.S.-Mexico border. Since taking office, President Biden and Vice President Harris have shirked responsibility for this crisis by placing blame on the historic levels of illegal crossing on everything from COVID-19 to climate change to former President Trump. They are hoping Americans will forget that President Biden's first order of business was to repeal nearly every immigration policy of the previous administration. The Biden administration's talking points say our borders are closed, but their actions indicate just the opposite. More than 12,000 of the Haitians that gathered under the bridge...
All right, everybody. So if you haven't been paying attention, it's 4:02 p.m. on the East Coast. What I'm going to do is this is live Senate hearings. Everyone can watch it on senate.gov and then look for the live stream. If you're watching on social media, you can do it. Myself and my family are going to go look at the new office because they are as excited as I am. So we're just going to drive over there. For anyone that's watching on Citizen Stringer TV, on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Android TV, it'll still be live. You'll be able to watch the Senate hearings until they end or I come on 8 o'clock Eastern time. Please make sure you click up at the top so you can watch my show tonight because we're shadow banned, so they don't give us any notification, or they won't give you notification. 8 o'clock Eastern time. Tonight's going to be a rant night. That's pretty much what everyone is going to be subjected to, is one of Steve's infamous rants. Yes, I just said my name in third person. Why? Because I can. Anyway, we'll see you. I'm going to end this stream on social media in about 3 seconds. 1,